Welcome to my channel. I'm Lucy and this is Geek Petite. Thank you so much to my subscribers for coming back and watching more, and if you're new here, you're very welcome and I hope you'll stay. So today's video is all about my finished UFOs that I talked about in vlog 2. So if you want to go over and have a look at that, I'll pop a card up and you can kind of go watch that and then come back and see this video as part 2. Okay, so I'm just going to go through everything in the same order as the previous video. So we're starting off with the Rosa, and I'm so pleased with how this has turned out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about various things. I'm going to talk about sizing and how I kind of came to decide what size to make, and I'm also going to talk about the challenges that I came across and how I sort of got got past those, and it's all a learning curve, isn't it? So I think it's important to look at those things, and also I'm going to talk about just what went well and what's been really good about the pattern and the finished garment. Okay, so if I'm looking down a little bit, it's just because I've made some notes that I've stuck to my tripod, just to make sure that I don't forget the things that I want to talk about. So let's start with the sizing. So when I first decided to make this, which was quite a few months ago, probably before the first lockdown actually, my measurements were, I was a 39 bust, 33 waist and 39 on the hip. Now this is a tilly in the buttons pattern and I usually make a size 5. So it made sense for me to look at that sizing first of all on the measurements chart. And the measurements for a size 5 were a 38 on the bust, a 32 on the waist and a 41 on the hip. So the hip was fine, but for the other two measurements, obviously they were a little bit smaller than my actual measurements. So as I always do, I had a look at the finished garment measurements. And I thought, I wasn't quite sure to be honest, because I haven't made a shirt before. And obviously I knew that it would need to fit well across the bust and with the buttons and everything. So what I decided to do was I decided to make a toile. Now what I had actually worked out was that I didn't need to do a full bust adjustment. According to Tilly's books, it tells you that if your upper bust measurement, which is across here, and your full bust, if the difference between them is no more than 2 inches, then you don't need to do a full bust adjustment in a tilly pattern. But as I say, I was just, I just wanted to make sure that it was going to fit me. So what I did was I made a toile just out of a cotton sheet. So what I'm going to do is just insert a little bit of video to show you the toile, and then we'll come back and talk about it some more. Okay, so this is my toile of the Rosa, and like I said, I was an inch shorter on the bust when I actually made this. So it does look a little bit tight there, but you can see how, when I've done it, I've been able to see that I'd be able to get those buttons done up all the way down the front. And I've got the, I've written on it what it is, and then I've written on all of the separate pieces as well with my friction marker, just to help me when I was putting it together. You can see that I did the yoke bit at the back, and basically just put the whole piece together, apart from the sleeves obviously, and there was no point in putting the collar in or anything like that. It was just to make the main body of it so that I could see that it was going to see that size was going to fit me, and then I could go ahead and make it in my fabric. So let's go back to the actual shirt and talk some more about that. Okay, so as I mentioned, my measurements are a bit different now. I've put on an inch around my bust, a couple of inches around my waist and a couple of inches on my hip as well. So it is a little bit snug and a little bit tight. but you know, you can see how, you know, it would have fitted just right at the time, and I'm sure I'll manage to lose a pound or two and get it back fitting as it should do. So let's have a talk about some of the challenges. So all the things that perhaps, you know, didn't go so well, and how I got over those. So the first thing to talk about is the buttonholes, and now I haven't got a lot of experience of doing buttonholes. This is maybe the second or third garment I've made with buttonholes on it. So what I did was I remembered from, you know, watching other videos and stuff that the most important sort of positioning was on the bust, to make sure that you don't end up, you know, with sort of buttons above and below where you're going to end up with gaping, even if you've got a good fit. So I positioned that hole first, and then I did, I don't know, I just wasn't very accurate with measuring the rest of them, and you can see that here something's gone wrong where I've ended up with, you know, a wider gap than the other ones, but it's absolutely fine, it's not an issue at all. And I just decided not to bother doing the top one, because with shirts I don't like that, it feels too tight around my neck, so I don't bother ever doing up a top button. So I thought I would just leave that one out. But apart from that, you know, the buttonholes went in fine, and yeah, that was pretty simple. And it's got a nice nice placket in there, just for a little bit of cotton. Now, the other thing to mention is that I didn't realise this at all until I was actually doing the buttons and then putting them all together, that I'm out of sync here. You can see this you know, that my top stitching, just do that button up again to make it more clear. You can see that it's kind of, they're not aligned on either side, and that's just something that I hadn't thought to check during the sort of construction, because there's no point at which you kind of match those two sides until you're doing this bit. It was absolutely fine on the toile, and it's, you know, it's perfect on that, but it's just that I obviously haven't been quite accurate with that on the actual garment. So that's something that when I make another one, because I definitely will be, I'll be looking out for that and checking that they line up as I go along. But I mean, you know, as it goes, I don't think it's massively noticeable to anybody else, and it's certainly not going to put me off wearing it. It's just one of those kind of imperfections, so I can easily live with that. So another thing I wanted to talk about was the collar. Now, it's the first time I've done a collar, and it's got, you know, quite a few bits. It's got like an inner collar, an outer collar, and then there's the collar stand. Now, the instructions were absolutely brilliant for putting all of that together. I think the problem for me was that I've used, for the kind of inner bit, I've used a fabric, this navy fabric. I just had it in my stash and thought, oh well, that'll go nicely and kind of make a nice contrast. But when I then came to actually constructing it, and in particular poking out the collar points, what I realised was that that fabric, that navy fabric, is actually quite a bit thicker than the sort of chambray that I'm using for the actual shirt. So unfortunately, I think they just didn't work brilliantly together. So it's made that a little bit more chunky and thick than it needs to be, and that's meant that my collar has ended up not being, you know, sort of nice and pointy, and this is a little bit thick, but it doesn't feel uncomfortable or anything. And again, it's just one of those learning things, isn't it? That, you know, just because you've got something readily available that would work, or you think would work, it's about thinking about how those two fabrics can actually work together, and are they very, very different, and you know, should they sort of be a similar weight and things like that, which I think in this case they definitely should have been. So that was just a little bit of learning for doing a future one as well. Just checking my notes. So yes, the I made a real boo-boo, and I thought it was all over when this happened. What was happening was I was actually, I'll just turn and show you the yoke at the back so you can see that a bit better. So what happened was, when I was putting the when I was constructing the back pieces, I'd like finished off the seams and I was trimming them down, and what happened was, literally as I kind of was finishing off, and I just went to put the scissors down and the back piece down, I kind of closed the scissors as I was putting it all down, and it took a little snip out of the back, the centre piece. I'll pop a little picture in so you can see that little snip, and then how I kind of repaired it. So I was just thinking, oh no, this is a disaster. It's all over. You know, it started fraying really quickly as well. So I was thinking, I'm never going to be able to fix this. But I ended up just using like a little bit of you know, interfacing, iron-on interfacing, and then what I did was I used heat and bond to stick against one of the stars. Well, I took an area where there was a large one of the largest stars, and what I did was, I think there's one there. What I did was I put the heat and bond on the other side to give it that strength and have that sort of double-sided stickiness, and then I really, really carefully cut out a large star, and then I was able to just take off the backing paper and then iron that, stick that against the little V tear on the back. And I mean, you really can't, I mean, I know where it is, but nobody else would be able to tell. And I am slightly nervous about washing it, but I think I'll maybe just put it on a cool wash and hopefully it'll be absolutely fine. But yeah, that was another learning thing. When you've finished trimming, keep your scissors, get your scissors well out of the way from the garment. It's just one of those things that, you know, I would never have expected to happen, but made it past it and, you know, managed to fix it, so that was absolutely brilliant. Okay, and what turned out well, so I think with this pattern one of the things is there's a lot of pieces, and it was certainly the most pieces that I've ever used in a garment so far. So that I thought was going to be quite daunting, but what I did was I used my friction marker, to, a little bit like I did on the toile, what I did was I just kind of used abbreviations so that I knew exactly what each piece was. And it just meant that, because a lot of them actually look similar, so when I was, you know, following the instructions and putting things together, you know, if it said get the, you know, side front panels, I could just find those so easily, and I knew for certain that that was the right piece. So it just gave me that confidence, you know, that I knew everything was right, and that I was going to be able to find those easily and not make mistakes. So that actually made that a lot less daunting, and that went really well. The back yoke, I was a little bit worried about doing that because I thought it might be a bit complicated, but actually it was fine. And the sleeves went in okay. You do have to ease them, so you do the you know, you do the bit where you put the gathering stitches in, and then you gather it up around the around the sleeve head, and then you get it to fit with the armhole. And sometimes that can be really tricky, but this was absolutely fine. I did end up with a few tucks, but I managed to just unpick them and redo them, and they came out great. And also the little sleeve tab, so I do like that feature, and they were really super easy to do. And yes, I think I mentioned in the other video that I actually bought the Tilly course, sew your own shirt or shirt dress, so that was a massive help as well. And I'm going to actually make another one. I'm going to make the dress version, and I've already got that cut out actually, but it is quite a lightweight fabric, so perhaps something that's going to be more suitable for the spring. But what I want to do with that one is I'm going to go back and watch the course again, and I'm going to obviously use that to help me constructing that shirt dress. And then what I'd like to do is maybe a review of the actual course, because I think that might be really helpful to people as well, if they may be considering buying one of the online courses, or that particular one, because I certainly found it helpful. So yeah, I'll probably do that. And yes, I love the fabric that I've got for that dress version, but I'm going to save that and show you another time. So yay, that is my Rosa all finished. Okay, so garment 2 is the Orla blouse. So I've got quite a bit to talk about on this, so excuse me just having my notes here, but again, I don't want to miss telling you things that are important. So this is another Tilly pattern, and I also started making it when I had those previous measurements. So again, what I did was I checked the measurements for a size 5 on the measurements table of the pattern, and the size 5 for this one was again taking me an inch down on the bust and on the waist. And the hip was fine because that was a bit bigger. So what I did was looked at the finished garment measurements. So when I looked at those, it was giving me 2 inches of ease on the bust, 2 inches of ease on the 4 inches of ease on the waist, and about 4 inches of ease on the hip as well. So I knew that was going to be enough ease for me, so that would be fine. So that's what I did. I just decided to make the size 5. Okay, so let's go on to the learning. So the first thing was in relation to the zip that's in the back. So I'll just turn around and show you that. It's an exposed zip. So I hope you can see that okay. Yes, it's an exposed zip, and it's at first it looks quite simple in terms of actually, putting it in to the centre back piece. But actually I came across problems because it just wasn't very clear in the instructions. The first bit was simple enough, but then putting on the other side, it just looked really complicated, and you couldn't kind of see in the pictures where the rest of the garment or how the rest of the garment was positioned, if that makes sense. So I just couldn't work out, how I was supposed to have it positioned. So what I did was I went onto the actual website, because there is kind of a blog, there's a sort of sew along blog on there, and then there was a different photograph on there that was much more helpful, and then I was able to work out sort of how to do that next bit. So it took me a long time to get that first, to sort of sew the zip in at the beginning. And then what happened was later on, you have a facing, that then goes over that zip on the inside. So when it came to doing that, something had gone wrong. I think I've just not cut the fabric accurately. It is quite slippy. It's a polyester crepe de chine. So I think it had just, you know, it just wasn't an accurate cut. So what happened was, and I'll pop a video in so you can see this. I ended up with this kind of overlapping and bunching at the bottom of the zip when I had to match the facing with it. So in this little clip I show you, you'll be able to see that where my kind of fingers pointing across, I just had to do some little catch stitches, and obviously I was worried about it making it bulky at the back, but as you can see, it has no, you know, there's no issue there at all. You can't tell that there's anything, any bulk under there at all. It's just really smooth. So because initially I thought, oh, you know, if I have to, well, I just thought I really don't want to unpick all of that and start again. It's just going to be too much. So luckily that solution worked out and it was absolutely fine. So that was the zip, a little bit tricky. So if you are making this, I would look at the blog Sew Along on the Tilly website and just take that really, really slowly. Okay, so that was the zip. The next bit was the hem. Okay, so what happened with that was, and I know I mentioned on my previous video that it's got a hem facing, which is really, really nice. But when I kind of was lining up the side seams after I'd cut it, this bit at the bottom, they weren't the same length at that sort of side seam point. And so one bit was longer than the other on both sides, and at the time I just thought, oh, it must have something to do with that hem facing. So I didn't change it or anything, and then when I came to do the hem facing, I realised that again it must be inaccurate cutting on my part because of the slippiness of this. So what I did was, and I'll pop a little picture in so you can see where I noticed, you know, that there was extra fabric. What I did was, I thought, I've obviously just, you know, been a bit inaccurate, so I just trimmed it so that they were lined up, and that worked absolutely fine. There's no sort of, you know, it's all lovely and smooth and uniform around the hem. So yeah, so there was no problem there after all. That worked out as well. Okay, I also had a little issue with the bust dart. Now, my darts are ending up here, kind of on my bust apex, whereas really I think they should be starting just underneath the bust. And again, it was when I came to do it, I had markings, but I just wasn't sure which bit was for. It was just a bit confusing. So I ended up you know, just getting that inaccurate. I basically ended up where I sewed it, it was just came far too high up. But again, at the time I thought, well, I'm not gonna go back and redo everything. What I'll do is I'll just see, you know, I'll wait and see what it's like, and then I'll see if I can do something about that later if it's an issue. And actually, you know, obviously in future if I make another one, I'll watch out for that. But in this case, it just, you know, it hasn't made any difference. I mean, when I look down, there's kind of two little bits like nipples popping out, but nobody else is going to get that view, so they're not gonna notice that, and you know, it's fitting absolutely fine. So I guess that oh, I took an inch off the, got a little thread there. I took an inch off the sleeves because I think I mentioned before I have to shorten sleeves on those patterns, sometimes by quite a bit more than 1 inch. So, but I like the length of the sleeve, and yeah, it's really, really comfortable. It's got a lovely little, is it a little, it's not a dart, it's a little tuck on the shoulder. and that's really, really simple to do. I'm, you know, never quite sure about having a little bit of puffiness on shoulders for me, but it's absolutely fine. It looks really good. There are lots of good things about this this pattern. I just really like the fit. That kind of curved dart that comes all the way around from under the bust is really lovely. And then you have got darts in the back. You've got those fisheye darts in the back, and I think it just gives it some lovely shaping. So yes, another winner. Okay, and here is my finished kabuki tee. So with this one, in terms of sizing, it just has masses of ease because it's just a, you know, an oversized style to it. So what I did was I made a size 12, which yeah, just gave me loads and loads of ease. I mean, it would be very simple for you to just look at those, you know, finished garment measurements and decide, sort of compare that to your own measurements and just decide just how much ease you want. Really simple, because you're not going to go wrong. It's got so much room in it. So as I mentioned in my previous video about this top, the biggest problem I had was sewing these bits here. And what I think on reflection has probably made it more difficult, because it's just a really tricky technique. I think what's happened is, just come a bit closer and show you, because I've ended up with little tucks on both sides here and on the back, which are probably a little bit difficult for you to see, but obviously they're very noticeable to me. And I think what's happened is, perhaps it's to do with the fact that, again, like I did with the Rosa, I've used a much thicker fabric here on the sleeve bit than I have on the main part of the bodice. This little turtles fabric is more like a sort of quilting cotton, whereas this one is more of a like cotton twill. So again, I've kind of thought, oh, have I got some black to go with this this fabric in my stash, and I've had something that was enough to do this part, but it probably wouldn't matter so much with, you know, a different pattern. But because of this intersectioning here, and how, I mean, you literally end up, by the time you've done this trimming bit as part of the instruction, you end up with 1 millimetre of seam allowance in this little corner here. So there's no room for error. You can't undo it and play around. I think I did do it twice, and then I couldn't do it. You know, that was it. There was just no scope to redo it again. So perhaps the coming together of those two different thicknesses of fabric really hasn't helped me to get that technique right. And perhaps if they'd both been, you know, a similar weight fabric, I might not have got those tucks. I'd like to think that that's the case, and that because I was kind of put off ever using this pattern again, but actually now that I'm wearing it, it's I mean, obviously it's really cold outside and stuff, but it just feels so comfortable. I wouldn't usually wear something this short either, even though I'm a short person. I'm 5'1". I like to have things sort of covering my bum, so I actually prefer longer tops, but I could easily just put a longer vest underneath this. And I think in the summer it would just be, when it's really hot out there, fingers crossed, I think it would just be really cool and so comfortable on hot days. So I think I definitely think I'll wear it, and would maybe wear others. So yes, I'm not going to throw this pattern to one side. I'm going to keep it and hopefully make some more, probably not until the summer though. So yeah, and it's got a lovely binding in the neck, really like that, and that you know, that went in lovely, and the instructions were all great for that and for the rest of it. Oh, I've also got a little bit of kind of bunching at where the sleeve joins the side, and again, I think that's probably just because of the difference in the weight of the fabrics. So, you know, hopefully that'll not be an issue in the future. So yeah, I think that's all there is on the Kabuki. I think the Fold line have promoted this a bit recently because they've got the pattern in stock. So so if you wanted to get it, you can probably get it from them. Yeah, so that is my Kabuki all done. Right, and the fourth UFO that I showed you was actually a garment for somebody else. It was for my friend Dave. So I didn't get it to him before Christmas. That just ended up being impossible. So, but I did get it to him in the new year, and luckily the sleeves, well, everything, it fitted really well. He said it was a perfect fit, and he did send me a picture which I'll pop in. Just chopped his head off for his privacy. But I'm so pleased with how that turned out. It's an absolutely brilliant pattern. You get, in the one pattern, you get so many different sizes. You get a whole range of children's sizes, and then right through to a range of adult sizes. I can't recommend it enough. Just a simple Raglan t-shirt. So what I've actually done is, for those who might be interested, I've put together a playlist of tutorials on it, because the Crafty Gemini, who I follow on YouTube, had very helpfully done these sew-alongs in 4 parts. So what I've done is pop them all together in a playlist, just to make it more helpful if you fancy making it and following that along, because it's just going to make it so simple for you. The only thing I do differently from Crafty Gemini is I do sew, I just sew it on the overlocker, or I use a zigzag stitch. I don't use, the pattern calls for you to actually do 2 lines of stitching, like a zigzag and a straight stitch, and in her videos she uses a straight stitch but kind of stretches the jersey as she sews it. That's just not a technique that I've used or that I would be comfortable with. So I'm just sticking with, you know, well, when I've made it, I've just stuck to the techniques I use on all jersey t-shirts and sweatshirts and things. So so that's how I've done it. So obviously everyone's different, so, you know, give it a try if you want to, or just use your own technique. But I hope that'll be helpful for people who are interested in that pattern. So all of the things I've talked about, I will pop links below, including a link to that playlist. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have and you want to see future stuff, please click on the bell, and please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be back really soon, guys, with another video. Okay, bye!